Welcome to another episode of Life Talks. Today I have returning guest Justin Copeland. Really happy to have you here, Justin. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, man. I'm always excited to sit down. I mean, we obviously talk every week, but be able to cut this and hit directly just you and I and share our thoughts and our hearts with what God's doing for us. I'm stoked up, man. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. Well, you sent me a Instagram reel last night, and I know this is one of your favorite scenes, but it's with great. Now the actor is gone for me, but
Shia
Shia LaBeouf. What is it about that scene and that quote in the Bible where "Whom shall I send"? What is that really? Why does that really resonate with you?
So I want to set the scene in the context. So that scene I sent you from that reel is from the movie Fury, which is one of my favorites. Brad Pitt, Shia LaBeouf, some of the other guys. They're that guy actor. You know what I'm talking about? But in that scene, they're sitting in the tank, right? This whole movie is about the treatment of tanks during World War II, and they've got to a spot in this crossroads in their campaign, and the war's not far from being over. They know that, but they've still got work to do. It's not done. And they've been assigned this mission, and it all goes wrong, right? You know, the tracking to the tank falls off, and so now they can't move it. So they're sitting in the tank, and they've got this great decision weighing on them of going, we could run back now and save ourselves, or we stay here because we know if we give up this road, whatever town or whatever, area they were sent to defend is now in trouble. It's compromised. And so in that scene, Shia LaBeouf and all the guys are sitting there, and they're honestly facing their mortality, right? And he brings up, Isaiah, I think it's Isaiah 6, and he's saying, I heard the Lord, the voice of the Lord, and it basically says, he's asking, who will go for me? Who will go and fight for me? Who will go and stand for me? And in this moment of facing their demise, they're done with life. I mean, it's right in front of him. And he quotes this verse and he says, well, here am I. And the human side of him hits because he says, here am I. And he chokes up because the reality of it is, he goes, in the next few hours, I'm no longer going to be breathing. But I accept this calling, and I accept this imminent death because this is what I'm here to do. It's fallen on my shoulders. It's my responsibility. So here am I, send me. And my God, every man wants to sit back and say, when the time came, if I had to stand between the face of death and something I loved, I would do it. Would I do it? You know what I mean? And to me, that's the mindset. That's the heart of a warrior, right? But more specifically, that of a Christian warrior, saying, God, whatever you have me do, I will do, because it is your calling, regardless of what this might mean in the outcome. And so that scene, that verse, it moves me, man. Even talking about it right now, I know the scene, it gives me chills. And, I hope, my prayer is always that I would be that guy. The other side of it, just breaking it down simply, it's a military film. I was in the military. I love anything with that. And it fires me up to see these guys because I know so many of them that, they're just incredible people, man. It's something that we're missing now.
I think that's a common theme with a lot of these movies that, the men of this generation look up to, like 300 or Braveheart, or 300, that it just comes to mind, where it's just they're in that last scene where it's like, it's been an honor to die at your side. It's been an honor to have lived at yours. Like that, those moments in time where it's like, there's something bigger than our little life. We're fighting for something bigger here. We're fighting for our children. We're fighting for ideals. And that's something I thought about in 2020. It's in part why I made this channel, not to pat myself on the back, look at me. But what I realize is how much we need a lot more communication. We spoke just briefly before the call, our ability to really communicate with each other. And these are deep ideas. And to shift gears a little bit on why I'm bringing that up is that when I started this channel, and we started in the group that we've spoken on before, 57, that you started, it started kind of as a men's group, macho, right? And now it's shifted a lot more towards Christ. And I look at the younger version of me, and I would say, how would I speak to younger version of Mike? Well, Mike was not interested in church. I would go, and I kind of got the premise of it. But as I get older and the more I really connect the dots and realize how I was not really looking for the truth, I was looking for the world. I'm seeing the power of it. I'm seeing how so important it is. You know, when people say they're Christian, like, what does that mean to you? When people say they're American, what does that mean to you? Do you know the Constitution? Do you know the Declaration of Independence? What does that mean? Because otherwise, you're just saying it. You're just okay, cool. So, what is it that led you down this path? And maybe what would you say to younger men who are kind of like, you know, because we talk about Christ often and often and often now. I do because my own mistakes, my own sin, convicted of my own sin. What would you say to other men who and yourself sharing your journey? Why is it all? It seems to be all roads lead to Christ. Right. Is that's the highest value structure? If you could just speak on
Yeah,
that.
no, it was accidentally. Redmond Lowe, who you know very well, good brother of mine, you know, he calls it God incidents, and that's exactly what it was. So, you know, there's a plan and a path that we all have. It's just whether or not we recognize it, whether we open it enough to see it. And not only that, but when I go back to Isaiah, when it says, "Here am I, send me," it also means, do we have the courage to accept it? And so when I started like you. I started a podcast. I had a blog, Navigating the Intentional Life. I still have both of those things. And in that time frame, I was speaking to men. The idea was, you know, we all have these abilities, but a lot of us are afraid to tap into them. And so I wanted to speak to people that were doing it. They were men in the arena, and they were, but more specifically, they were people in the arena, men and women alike. There was no intent to just speak directly to men and then do this man crusade of like, how do we become stronger, better, you know, fathers, husbands, you know, workers, all that. It just started to shift that way. You know, I started to meet these other guys that were in the arena, and they were the, you know, and thankfully you've explained this to me so I can actually speak on it with some intelligence. Is, you know, there was the red pill guys, and there were the white pill guys, and there were the black pill guys, and, you know, all these different colors of pills. And I'm a guy that's never like taken drugs. I mean, I don't even, you know, take the flu shot. So, you know, trying to understand and grasp all these different mindsets, I knew they were all trying to get to the same place, but they just had different paths. And for a while, I drank that Kool-Aid. And that's when we started the men's group, because I was looking at these other guys profiting off of guys that were struggling, off of guys that were unsure, off of men that had not had good relationships or no relationships with their fathers. And the way they were doing that was saying, hey, come join this group. We're going to have X, Y, and Z conversations, and it's going to make you better. We're going to smack you in the face with going to the gym, right? We're going to smack you in the face with our ideas of how to parent. And that's what they were. And they were just ideas, right? There was very little, what's the word I'm looking for here? There was very little kind of backing to it. It was just words like, don't do this and do this, don't do this. But there was nothing to say like, well, this is how you handle a 2-year-old. This is how you handle a 10-year-old. This is how you handle a 16-year-old. And so I started to get caught up in this manosphere. And the group was running, and I just got to a space about 9 months ago where the podcast to me wasn't fun anymore. I didn't like talking to, not that I didn't like talking to the people, but there was something on my heart and I couldn't identify it yet. Right. I wasn't sure what it was. I thought I was just, you know, losing my motivation, losing my drive. I was becoming lazy. I was struggling and making excuses, and I couldn't put my finger on it. But at the time, when I look back now, God was working, because I've always been saved since I was 7. And by God, I meant it at 7 years old. I knew what I wanted. You know, I was fortunate enough to grow up in church. My father busted his balls working multiple jobs, but we still got up when we went to church. And my parents both, you know, would volunteer, and they were Sunday school teachers. And so I had this great foundation around me. And you know, as most of us do, I drifted off for a while, about 20 years for a while, until the last 9 months, where that thing that was on my heart that I couldn't recognize, that was making me actually almost feel empty, was God saying, I'm qualifying you, right? But you're not in the right phase yet. And so I stepped back from the men's group, as you're aware of, because I felt like, how do I lead something that I'm not living? How do I lead something that I'm not passionate about? You know, because at that point, the guys in the group have all grown so much and really found their footing and their voices, and, you know, their hearts are on fire for what they're doing. But I wasn't there. It's like, well, how do I be the face of that and feel like I'm a counterfeit? I can't, and so I took that time off, and thank God I did, because in that time frame, God laid me down. We ended up moving, and some other things came up, that, some of these personal things, and, some hard things. And he said, no, this is why it's this way. Your job, because you can speak and you can write, is to further my kingdom and be a vessel to plant seeds. What was crazy about that is, in that time frame, the 57 became a Bible study, and we all hit it at the same time. Not planned, not like we got on the phone and said, hey man, do you think you want to read the Bible today? No, we were all already in that journey and on that path. And that's when I realized that the emptiness that I'd been feeling 9 months ago was actually God saying, this is not where I need you. I'm calling you. And I hear the Lord's voice. And was I saying, I'm saying, here am I, send me? No, I wasn't ready for that. This time frame of working the group and going through all the manosphere and listening to all these different dudes speak, is like, I appreciate what you do, but that's not where I want to be. This is not what I want to be associated with. So I stepped away from the podcast, because I don't want these chest beaters that all talk about how great they are and look what I did in the gym and, look at this and this and this accolade. No, because they would only speak about faith when it was beneficial to speak about it, right? When it made sense to boost a tweet. Oh, I'm a Christian, man. Yeah, but these tweets over here say nothing like that. Your board, your message, your website, your podcast speak nothing about that. It's only when it's convenient. That's not what I'm looking for. That's not what God is calling me to do. And so we get to this moment today where we go, well, look, here's the coming out party of saying, hey, look where Michael and Justin are now, and where Life Talks is going now, because Life Talks is now, how do you live this life as a Christian man and not, be in the world, but not be of the world.
And yeah, and you recently put me on Chosen. Shout out, and definitely check out that show. But the reason I go there is just because as I start talking about it, I realize how much of a hypocrite I am. And how the hell am I going to lead people to Christ where I'm a hypocrite? And I think it was you who spoke the other night where you're like, well, same thing with the disciples. They were broken men. Matthew was a tax collector and he wasn't liked by a lot of people.
Hated. Not liked, hated.
Sure. And and I can't help but realize that within myself. That's why I kind of shifted gears and speaking about porn and speaking about this issue. You see how many people are watching porn today. It's still the same thing, right? It's still, it's that's a part of us that's it's not fully recognized. And what I mean by that is that this whole dynamic, this whole, because if most men are honest, they've gone the same path as you, right? In the sense that they're looking for, they want girls or they want that attention. They're trying to fill that hole, and how to be in the world but not of it, how to go thy way. And that's a hard thing to do, because it's saying, what is the difference? What is the difference between Mike's way, Justin's way, and the right way? Well, Mike's way and Justin's way are going to be different ways, but can they be aligned with the right way? That are we following a code of conduct that is right? Are you gossiping? Are you proud? Are you stuck in lust? Are you stuck in vice? Where are you off? We know where we're off in our life if we're honest with ourselves. And that's really what I've realized is it's so necessary to be able to be around it's a paradox to be around humble people, to strip yourself of the pride in your heart. It's something that I realize more and more as I get older. But what would you say on that as far as, because I think there's a lot of people who are turned off by Christianity. And when I say a lot of people, I also include my younger version myself, where it's kind of culty. It's kind of kumbaya. It's kind of, let's accept our sin. Oh, you're a sinner. It's okay to stay in sin. That's the thing where I was kind of just turned off by it, because it should be something that maybe that's phase one. Hey, you know what? We're all sinners. We've all screwed up. We're not going to judge you here, but we're not going to let you stay there. We're trying to overcome that. We're trying to say, hey, you know what? It's not acceptable behavior. And when you fall, you need to get up on your feet and go the right way as we come to understand it. what would you say about that, as far as, because we speak a lot about lukewarm and, Revelations 3:16, right? This idea of that we want to keep one foot in mediocrity and one foot in going the right way, but we can't. We have to choose ultimately.
When I think about the church and my fortunate upbringing, is not something that is happening today with the church. And look, I am not the authority to speak directly on this. I'm speaking directly from my own experience and my viewpoint on this. And there are guys that see it far better than I do. But I grew up in a church where the leader of the church was a strong Christian man. There was no ear tickling, as my dad used to call it. You didn't just get the parts of the Bible that made you feel rosy and go, oh, look, you're saved and Christ is with you. So who can be against you? All those things are true. But let's talk about, well, how are you carrying yourself within your faith in the hardest, darkest moments when it is just you and God, right? And these are the kinds of men that, when they led the church, they expected that from the men in the church. There wasn't this watering down of be the nice guy. There's almost a shift where because of society and because the church is trying to fit in and be hip with society and stay relevant to what's going on now, there's this watering down, and it's a reverse of the man needs to be submissive to the wife because we need to let the women roar. And it's backwards. And so when I look at church now, it starts with leadership first and foremost. What is the pastor? What are the main heads of the church? What are they espousing? What are they pushing? Are they pushing the entire Bible, or are they only pushing the parts that are topical or prosperity preaching? And this is where I start to make my judgments on church. And I use the word judgment, right? Because we're talking about my eternity and my family's eternity. So I'm going to judge, but I'm also not so sissy footed that I can't handle the word judgment and not lose my mind. So that said, I think when we're younger, the other aspect of it as a young man, especially, I mean, come on, like, you don't want to be told what to do, right? You're 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. You are invincible, bro. Like, hey man, don't tell me what to do. I got this, right? I'm a man. Don't tell me I can't do this. Don't tell me that I can't go after the hottest chick in the bar. Don't tell me that I can't go out and have a good time with my bros. Man, I was living that. And the reason I was living that was because I bought into the lies of the enemy, and the devil told me that, hey, look, this makes you good enough. When you get the attention from all of your bros because you can go out and you can get hammered until 4 a.m. and they laugh and we have a good time. And not only that, whilst doing so, you can find one of the better looking girls in the bar and get her to like you. Man, that's top notch. You are the alpha male. You're the big dog. And as a dude that's not that big to begin with, this really placated to the insecurities that I already had. And see, that's the trick of the enemy. He knows you better than you know yourself, right? So I grow up thinking nothing I do is good enough. So what am I always trying to do? I'm trying to fill that void, right? You said something about filling the holes earlier. Like, that's where I was attacked. And that's why I fell away from church, was because this made me feel better and it was easier, right? Come to find out, I was pretty good at it. And so that acknowledgement and acceptance was something that I felt was missing prior, because it's not easy to be a Christian man. You are expected to do a lot. Just what we spoke about the other night, forgiveness. You're not just supposed to forgive somebody because that's the right thing to do. No, you're supposed to forgive because God said to, so that he can then what? Forgive you. It's a big statement. And that's not easy. And so we all, in human nature, we tend to want to take the softer routes, right? We want to take the easier routes. Christianity is not that. Christianity is absolutely not that. And when you start to dive into your faith, as we have in the last 7-8 months, that it becomes increasingly more difficult, because now the questions that you never asked before, you're asking, and even more so, you're trying to answer. That pushes people away.
Yeah. And you said, you said it before, right? It's easy to put a nice quote on Facebook or on social media, but are you really living it? And that's the thing that is really, when you start to, and I have two questions here. One is, when you start to really shine and you start to really grow closer to Christ, I think one of the reasons why it's so difficult, and I'm curious if you go through that same thing. I mean, I'm sure you do, but it's you start to realize that people don't want to be judged. It's a very good point you made, right? We're afraid of this word judgment, but shouldn't we want right judgment? And who decides what right judgment is, right? And this idea also, it's the spirit of the Father I speak a lot about. It's to me, it's with Nicodemus when he's speaking with Christ. You know, there's many Nicodemuses out there right now with when if they were to hear born again, it's flesh gives birth to flesh and spirit gives birth to spirit. So the more that you seek whatever the material world, that's the flesh. It's the material world, and you can never have enough of it. But the spirit is that's the right thing to do. And you can there's some sort of power there. My question, I guess, is what does that mean to you as far as, being born again? Like what does that mean to you? Because a lot of people have different views on that. And it was one of I made that my social media on some of the platforms. What is born? Two questions. One is what does it mean to be a godly man, a strong man? And two, what does it mean to be born again?
So I'm going to answer it in reverse order because you can't have one before the other. So to be born again is about salvation, right? And what that salvation is I mentioned already, I got saved when I was 7. And so, we if you've been to church, you know that there's always a time where they ask, if God has moved in you today and you want to accept Christ into your life, raise your hand or come to the front, so that we can speak to you. Well, to accept Christ is to say, look, I put away all of my old worldly things. I hear your calling. I feel your spirit moving within mine, and I want to give my life to you, right? And so there's a contract then written, is the way I'll put it. And that what I'm saying here is that we've got, and I wish I had my Bible with me right now, but we've got this contract right here in the Bible of saying this not only is going to show you how to get into heaven, but it's going to show you how to operate here on earth. It's going to show you how to operate with your children, with your wives, with your friends, with your coworkers, all of that. And so when you accept me into your life, I now have that path through Christ to God, right? So being born again, that acceptance, it's symbolized in baptism, right? You go out and we get dunked underwater and then we come back up. And what that symbolizes is I'm washing away the old Justin, because the old Justin was sin and flawed, a piece of crap, a liar, a cheater, right? The most vile of humans. And when he rises again, now he's a man that says, I want to follow Christ. And to be Christian is to be Christ-like and work towards what Christ did. We're never going to get there. We're never going to be that. But it is, I'm going to live my life in this way. So now, to answer the second question, you have to be born again as you become saved and you believe in Christ. And now you have eternal salvation. Now, in that, the new doesn't mean that everything that you used to do is now gone and you're never going to want it again. You're never going to see an attractive woman with a gray butt and go, yeah, I'm not interested. You're still going to see it. The devil is going to work harder on you now than he's ever worked because he doesn't have you anymore. Right now, he's got to fight for you. He's got to put things in front of you that distract you, that hurt you, that are going to say, no, I don't want you, God, because you've allowed this, and this to happen in my life. And what kind of God does that? You say you're my father? I'm going to compare that to my earthly father. He tries not to let me get hurt. What are you doing? It's the wrong way to look at it. But once you find that and you get that salvation and you are born again, now we can start talking about what it means to be a godly man. Because a godly man is seeking the wisdom of Christ. He is seeking the relationship with God, right, through Christ. And that means prayer. That means your group is going to change. The people that you associate with are now going to change, because it's not that you don't love the people from the old group still. You're called to still love them. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what Christ did. It just means that the time that you spend with them is going to change, because realistically, they are now not going to want to be with you as much, right? Because again, I go back to the friend that I said to call, like, hey, if he's not going to be on a Saturday night because he wants to go to church in the morning, that's the friend you should be calling. That's the friend you want to be associating with once you've been saved, because you're trying to be a godly man. And a godly man is something that you will never fully reach, but you will spend your whole life practicing.
There's something that you said that I wrestle with, right? We're never going to be Christ. And I get that, because he was perfect in human form, right? And he had no sin. He was sinless. Whereas the difference is that we've had sin. And in that regard, we will never be Christ. The thing that I often reflect about is when Christ said, greater things others will do than I. That's the thing that I think about. Right. And it kind of just popped in my head because I still reflect on that. And it's because it's, it's maybe it's through God. But my question is, what do you think that meant? Right. And because it's a difficult question because it's like the ego wants to step in and be like, oh, I'm going to be like, yeah, let's go. Right. He wants to step in and say, oh, I'm going to be like that. What do you think he meant by that?
One, I think there's several things that come because you brought this up the other night, and I thought about it, and I'll go to this first point because I don't want to lose it. But I don't think that he was speaking in a sense of like, you're going to be greater than me in the works that you do, and that means you're going to be above me, because Christ worked with humility anyway, right? Ultimate humility. But I also think he knew his time was short. So I almost question that as like, did he mean from a timeline perspective, like, you're going to have more time, you're going to be able to impact more through this process and carry this story that's going to reach people directly for thousands and thousands of years. And it's something that we're like, he knew he wasn't going to be around past 33 years old. Right. So he had this, I mean, if you think about it, he had this small window of time. I don't know when historically he started preaching and he started becoming the rabbi that he was. I don't know enough about it to actually answer that. So what I see is he had this small window of time where he was doing what he was doing, and then boom, they killed him. Right. So I wonder sometimes on that, if he knew from a timeline perspective, he didn't have as much time. And then from a humility perspective, I think I look at it and go, well, he knew that he was the Son of God, but we're human, we're sinners, right? And so when you look at, and I thought about this as you're saying, like, I don't want to be perfect. I would hate to be perfect, because if you imagine what he must have gone through, it had to have been really frustrating, but he knew he wasn't going to sin. He knew he was going to be perfect while he was here. And then watching us fumble it up all the time had to be so frustrating. It's like watching a kid try to tie his shoe for the first time. You just want to step in all the time. Like, what are you doing? You got to have that patience. But it's greater for us because we are human. It's harder for us because we are human. Right. And we're going to be attacked by the enemy consistently, and we're going to be attacked by the people that we consider peers. And when we start to follow that path, all of a sudden, because what we're doing makes people uncomfortable, those that we thought loved us are now going to persecute us.
Why does it make people feel uncomfortable?
Because it requires you to be accountable. It requires you to open up and say, this is my struggle. This is where I'm weak. This is where I fall short consistently. And nobody, especially men, want to admit that, because vulnerability is weakness. Not being able to figure it out on your own is weakness.
How do you balance the vulnerability and the tolerance aspect with accountability, right? Because I feel like it's such a fragile line.
So my thing is this is the way I look at it. I go, if I can't handle something, if I'm trying to fix something or make something better and it's not getting there, I then have to reach out. Again, we talked about the group. When I walked away from it, I was struggling and I didn't reach out. And see, that's weakness, right? Like that's effing weakness, because it allowed me to stay in the same muck that I was in because I was too afraid to say that I couldn't handle it, right? Or I wasn't there. I was struggling mentally, emotionally, whatever, spiritually, whatever it was. I didn't reach out. And so often as guys, we don't, because if we do, we've got this conception of society around us that we will be seen as weak. And it's like, when I can't fix it on my own, it's just like, to me, I look at it like this. I'm not a car guy. So if my car breaks down, I'm going to call a mechanic. Why? Because he's a professional. Why? Because he knows more than I do. I'm not going to sit there and, bumble my way through it and never fix my car, right? Because it's not going to happen, even if I use YouTube. But I'm going to call that guy for help. To me, it's the same when I'm struggling emotionally and mentally. I'm going to call the guy that I lean on, the person that I lean on the most. Maybe it's you, maybe it's Caleb, maybe it's my dad. I'm going to reach out. They're the mechanic in my need at that situation where I'm broken down and I need the tweaks. I need the process of understanding. And it's vulnerable. It's like, hey, dude, I can't handle this. It doesn't feel good. But on the other side of that is going, hey, look, it sure as hell feels good when that car starts running again. Right. it sure as hell feels good when you come out on the other side and people want to applaud that. They go, oh, dude, you worked through it. You got through the muck, right? Oh, you're so strong. It's like, do you know what I had to go through to get there? I reached out. I was vulnerable. Guys don't want to talk about that. They don't like it.
Yeah, I can definitely relate as far as there's that. Yeah, that's why I asked where's the line, because I I I wrestle with the idea of there's an idea of healthy pride, right? Because if you're always asking questions, you're always looking to follow somebody else, you're always looking for help. It's it can very much be very quickly become dependency, and it can be lack of self-belief that you can do it on your own, right? So it's almost like there's so many paradoxes, right? When you're around a lot of men who are humble, but at the same time they want to encourage you to do things on your own, right? It's like what they say with when it comes to seniors or even kids, you help them do. Ultimately, the goal is to help them help themselves, right? So the idea is that there is still that independency. I think that we as men we're called to be strong, and many of those times we're going to be alone. We're not going to have anybody. Even think about I think about it all the time, right? Christ was denied 3 times and Judas betrayed him. Even your solid people who are going to be in your group are going to betray you. So at the end of the day, you're on your own. But at the same time, it still doesn't mean you fight on your own. You have to lean on like-minded men. And it's something that I think it's really a perfect balance, because ultimately it's between you and your conscience. It's between God, but you you want to, I think the lean in is, and that's really where the humility comes in, because when you're around people who really drop all their bullshit and they say, I've fucked up here, I'm screwed up here, I'm all, there's just something that it's like, there's just something that's so real about that. And I feel like that to me really is the way forward, because it's the truth. And what I've realized, definitely what you said, is you're going to have people who one, a lot of people are going to mock that because they don't know if you're real. So like when people, I think about this, like when people like mock Christ or whatever, it's almost like, because when you mentioned like, you're still going to see the girl on the street, nice ass, right? That there's something about that statement that it's real, right? Because it's like, we're going to pretend we're holier than thou. No, the idea is that there is something greater than getting pulled into that, right? Getting pulled into lust, getting pulled into that. There's nothing wrong with that when it's rightly ordered, right? When it's your wife and you have it in the right context, right? Go nuts. But when it's out of order, then the I think the pull becomes, well, why is it out of order? I think that's the best way. It's like, hey, I'm struggling here, but why is it out of order? Oh, like, and really open that up in a conversation. I'm not going to dive into that now, but because then you become, I think that's how you become more of a godly man. Um, it becomes more of, I recognize a part of me that wants this, but I recognize there's another part of me that's like, that's not leading me to where you make those mistakes and you lead to, is that what we want to have? Degeneracy and just objectification and just that. Um, I guess to tie this into a question, and I asked this with another guest, is how do we be in the world but not of
it? So it's an interesting question, because it's very difficult to not get caught up with things of the flesh and being of the world, right? Because it can be so much fun, man. I think it was Redmond that was talking about, when he was addicted and he was an alcoholic and, all these things, and he's out smashing it, just smashing it. And I can't help but grin, because I can think back to my own stories and go, it was fun, right? It was fun. But on the other side of that, and this is why the devil is just so incredibly tricky, is you wake up the next day and the hole that you had the night before, which I wish I would have picked a different word there, but the emptiness that you felt the night before is even bigger the next day, right? Because it was fun, but that emptiness has just grown. You just widened it, right? And so it lures you in that way. But that's part of qualification. God calls, he doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. That saying, I've heard it so many times, and I thought of that as like, no, you go to Bible school and you learn the verses inside and out, and the Bible, you've read it multiple times. But really that is part of it, yes. But it's what you've gone through in life, those hard things that you decide, hey, I can't handle this on my own, or hey, I'm tired of this emptiness. I'm turning to Christ. Christ has moved in me. That's part of the qualification. And so the best way to work within this world and not be of it is to remember the qualification that you went through so that you can then identify with those that are still in it, right? And living of it, to show them, hey, I was there and I get it. But now I'm on this side of things. And I can tell you what I have here is far superior to anything that I had over there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I
I
hope
think
that
that's
makes
real.
sense.
Yeah, I think it's well said. Could you repeat that again as far as the qualifications? Because yeah, you're speaking on the experience of it and what the fruits are you bore of it. And then saying, well, didn't bear me good fruit. I felt the guilt, the shame, that hole becomes a little bit, that hole in your heart becomes a little bit bigger. Right. So if you could just repeat that again, the qualification.
Yeah. So, and I don't know who said it. I don't know where it comes from. It might have been from The Chosen. I don't know. But it's not mine. I didn't come up with this. But it's God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called.
Yeah,
And
that's really good.
you said it earlier on the podcast, with the disciples and the chosen, and you see how fallible they were and the things that they were doing and who they were prior. And I feel like the strongest part of that show is actually showing the human aspect of not only the disciples, but Jesus and everybody else around it. They were human. They were human,
Yeah, they
right?
were. I just saw an episode last night. It was season 2. They're all fighting with each other about what Jesus means, right? Like, what would it like? You did this wrong. You did like, and you can just see that still today. We're still doing that, right? Even now, it's like this is why what's really drawn to me is this thy way, and that's why I asked the questions about people who are kind of like, I mean, Christ is culty, the church, all this, where there's hesitation because that was me, because there's even people now. You have all different priests and different theologians arguing what Christ meant, right? So whose is the right way? And that's why you have to go within, right? The kingdom of heaven is within. We know deep down, I think it's within our hearts that we know the right way. But the problem is it's you have to take that personal journey. You have to say, you have to be willing. I've really reflected on this lately. You have to be willing to be humiliated. That's humble, right? If you live in pride, I think there's a proverb. You live in pride, essentially, you're going to be humiliated, right? So the better humiliation is welcome humiliation. Ask the questions. Start looking and say, hey, you know what? Maybe this isn't the right way to live. And 9 times out of 10, we know what those are. And then when you start going there, the 1 out of 10, maybe that was missed. That can be brought up when you're with like-minded men who can point that out.
But you know how you get to humility? Vulnerability.
Yeah.
They're in the same camp. To be humble, you have to be willing to be vulnerable, right? I mean, and I love speaking about vulnerability because it's so taboo for so many guys, right? Because I think what happens is it's the semantics and with the words, right? And when guys hear vulnerable, they hear whining, right? They hear the guys like, I can't do this, I don't know how, and in that case, yeah, like shut up. Like man up, dude. Like, let's take the man card out of that back pocket, maybe pick it up and let's put it back in our wallet and let's figure out how to move forward. That's not vulnerability. That's weakness. That's being a baby, right? Nobody wants that. But when I come to you and I say, hey man, I struggle with alcohol, that's vulnerability. Saying like, I want to fix this. I'm doing these things to fix it, but I don't have it all together. And so maybe I need you as an accountability partner. Maybe I just need to be able to talk to you. Maybe you've got experience in this field. Redmond and I talk about that all the time, but you said something I want to touch on because it cracks me up. Cult, this thing of church is a cult. It's like, yes, it is 100%. It's a cult. So is CrossFit. So are book clubs. These are all cults. When you look at the definition of cults now, this particular, it's wrapped in a system of religious venerations and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object, right? Relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange and or sinister. So cult is typically met with a negative connotation, right? But when you bring a group of people together that are devoted to a certain thing, falls into that. And so I think we do, like, especially in nowadays, in today's world, in American society, which is the weakest and lowest point it's ever been, we love to get caught up on words. It's feelings over facts. And I think that is one of the root issues that's happening within today's church. The one that I was going to, I've been struggling between two churches here. And the reason I know which one I'm not going to, right? I know which one, because the head pastor, and this is a large church, and I'm not going to say the name of it, and I'm not going to say the name of the pastor, because we're going to try to get through this podcast without this one being the first and the last one. But it's here in Oklahoma, in Owasso. It's a large predominant church in Oklahoma. And the head guy, the head preacher that's supposed to be leading us and guiding us to our eternity, will not speak about homosexuality, and he will not speak about abortion. Why? Why won't he answer the question? What are your thoughts? So-and-so? He won't answer it. Why? Well, that question's easy to answer, because if he answers it, he is now cutting off a portion of his church that is paying the bills. It impacts his bottom line, right? And we don't want to impact the bottom line. We all got to have a living, right? We all got to make the money. His living just happens to be off the church. And so is he really preaching the Bible, or is he picking and choosing the parts that keep his bottom line where he wants it? I can't go to a church like that. That's weakness, right? That's being a prosperity preacher. And in my mind, I want to use stronger words, but that's being a spiritual sissy. It's really tough as you try to clean up your act. There's certain words that you just really want to use, but I'm trying to stay away from it, right? Trying to but I can't get on board with that, because that's a weakness in a different way, right? And that's leading people down the wrong path of going, as long as you feel good, regardless of what the truth is, as long as you feel good, that's what's important. And that is part of the biggest problems with church today. It's trying to be of the world while preaching to not be of the world or in the world, right? It's picking and choosing the parts of the Bible that make it feel good.
Yeah, I think that's one of the, because people will zoom in on, it's not easy. It's not easy to really go down this path, because there is a lot of, I think there is some context, there's different times, and to be able to filter it out, I think it takes tremendous wisdom. So I think that's why at least I lead with humility, and really the ability to question it, right? And anybody who doesn't want to talk about abortion or homosexuality or whatever, it reveals character, because I think one of the greatest things that we have in our country is that First Amendment, and the fact that bad ideas should die in the light. So even I think one of the greatest things you could have is people who say, you know what, I think this is right or this is wrong, and let's talk about it, right? Because at least then we can have a discussion, and then we can set. And this is really the skill. This is one of the reasons why I made this podcast. Is as time goes on, I want to cover these topics more and more, and I want to be able to attack the argument without attacking the person, and realizing in my own life how attached I am to ideas. So not wanting to talk about LGBTQ, not wanting to talk about masks initially, that didn't take too much time, because vaccines, I put out a video, it was in 2021, where I think it's wrong, we're mandating vaccines. And this is someone who I've gotten vaccinated, I never really questioned things. It's I always kind of trusted institutions, but I've seen too many lies to just say, I can't just go along with that now. Doesn't mean I don't trust science. All this dismissive bullshit, right? And in the same way, I think, to dive into the LGBTQ, this is something that I think that is, what would Christ do, right? It comes back to, what would Christ do? I think he would sit with sinners. Trust all, but we have to be willing to say, well, what is the right way? And I think I've been really reflecting on this. There's generation, and it's the next generation, and there's degeneracy. And I had to look at my own life, right? I was degenerate watching porn for 15 years, stuck in it. I was degenerate. I'm straight, but I'm degenerate. So in the same way, this is just another branch of the same thing. We're all most of us are degenerate. Everyone's a sinner, but we choose to go the right way. That's a decision, and we have to die off to that old part of us. And I guess my question here is, what do you think Christ would say about the LGBTQ now, in your view?
I think you hit it right on the head. But I come from a background where I had a preacher multiple times. And I hope I'm quoting him correctly. It was Ed Gordon Caleb's dad, phenomenal man. And, he said, if Christ was here, he wouldn't be sitting in the church, he'd be in the bar. Like, what? Like, it's the first time I'd ever heard of it. I was a young man, and I was like, what? He's in the bar? What are you talking about? It's like, no, it makes sense, right? He's out there looking for those that are broken and lost, right? He wants to sit, like you said, he wants to sit with the sinners. Well, that's all of us, right? But how close are you to salvation if you're at least going to church? It doesn't mean that salvation is secure, right? A lot of the Jews before Christ came, I mean, that's what he came for. He's like, man, you can follow the laws, but you're finding a lot of ways to work around those laws and still be terrible, just greedy human beings, right? So this is what I'm here for. This isn't working. But when it comes to these hot topics like LGBTQ and abortion and stuff, it comes back to humility. And this is where all the sides get it wrong. You've got these extreme Christians that are telling people, hey, you're going to go to hell. You're a bad person. This sin is disgusting.
Westboro Baptist Church comes to mind. God hates fags.
Yeah. And I've had the pleasure of being around them twice. I went out to protest their protests when I was a much younger man. Almost went to jail because of it, because I threw a shoe at one of them. I was a wildfire, but and at that time, I have a picture of me riding in a truck with several people of the gay community, and the thing is, like, when you get these Christians that are doing that, that's just as bad as the gay pride parades where people are walking around naked in front of kids. That doesn't speak for the entire homosexual community, right? It speaks for a small facet of it, right? Just like the Hillsborough Church. Is it Hillsborough? I say that right?
Westboro Baptist Church.
Hillsborough is soccer related, but anyway, the Westboro Church gets it completely wrong, just like the gay pride parade is getting it completely wrong. Because at the end of the day, I don't like to say love is love, but that's because I feel like that's kind of their slogan. But I love.
I got it. I got it right up here. It's the love. You think of the Ephesians. Love is patient. Love is. You really reflect on that. Love is love, right? But I get it. It's become a quote where it's kind of bullshit.
It's become a misused motto for that camp. But like you said, I mean, my sin is my sin, and I don't have a month for it. I don't have a parade for it. And if I continue to live in my sin, just like anybody else, and I don't repent, I know where I'm going, right? So this attacking them is wrong, and this not saying anything is wrong as well, right? There's that passive, flaccid side of Christianity that the church is promoting that I can't get on board with. Again, and going back to Isaiah, saying, "Here am I, send me." Well, I've got a warrior spirit, right? I want to arm myself with the armor of God, and I want to do what he says is what I'm supposed to be doing. I have assignments just like you have assignments, and they're all different, but they're all meant to help the same thing. And so it's tough. It's a tough concept. Like, some of my closest friends, are homosexual. That's their preference. And that's a tough one, because it's like, well, if they were truly if they're born this way, just like you and I were born straight in the natural order of things from what the Bible says, man, that means they've got a real hard life to live, right? If that's their choice and they know it's sin, that means they have to live the rest of their life not doing it, and essentially being alone. I mean, I feel like I'm not authority enough on it to fully speak on it.
Well, yeah, and I think that's why I'm planting the seed and just talking about it. That's where we get there. We have, I believe we collectively, I mean, because I think if LGBTQ and we group this as it's all division, right? Devil divides. It's all division. You're either in the LGBT crew or you're in the Trump, or it's all division. And yeah, I have a quote here. Jesus ate with sinners, not because he wanted to appear inclusive, tolerant, and accepting. He ate with them to call them to a changed and fruitful life. Jesus calls for a transformation of life, not affirmation of identity. I love that. We're not here to affirm that, right? And there's plenty of sinners who are in the straight community, right? Sin is sin. This is the whole thing. But what I realized the enemy. This is that is from Luke 5:30. It's a quote I saw. I don't know if those are the exact words or someone changed it, but the core of it is it's really the last line. Jesus calls for transformation of life, not affirmation of identity, right? And how much of our identity is put, it goes back to the world. That's to follow Christ means to give up, it's to deny yourself. It's not to give in to the flesh. It's not even, and I think this is really we can maybe shift into this. This is a rightly ordered marriage, which is to follow God, right? Because I look at my favorite movie of all time is Gladiator, because, and look what happens to his wife and his kid. That's what he signed up for, because he knew deep down that if he obeyed orders and he did what he thought was, if he followed orders going against what he thought was right, then that would affect his family in some way. So they went through that horrible death, but in the end, the community, Rome, was saved because of his sacrifices. And those were painful sacrifices. He was a slave. He had to kill people. It was a circus. He was part of a circus, and he knew it was a circus, and he had to play this game. So, this thing of not watching porn is not godly. I did it. Wasn't natural. That's not natural. Watching a porn, watching pixels on a screen, that's not natural. So I had to look at the mirror, look myself in the mirror and say, what am I getting out of this? And to your point, it's like, I'm not a professional in this field. No, I am a human being, and I have reason. So I also don't dismiss my viewpoint on it, because I think it's important too. But, it's a conversation that needs to be had more, because people want to be put into a box, one side or the other. Either you're dismissive or we're human beings, right? And Christ, again, I think that really nails it. He wouldn't affirm people in their sin. And I have to look within my own sin. That's what I have to do. I have to address the hypocrisy in myself. And I hope to continue to do that on this channel, to stay humble, to lead other people out of their sin. And this is, I put a video on this the other day. People, it's easy to say, hey, Justin, you got to go to the gym. You haven't gone to the gym, brother, right? Or we have an accountability part 57, and there's times where I don't show up. It's one thing for me to say, you know what, I got to get on point with that. It's another thing to say to somebody who's believed something is right their entire life. Change that. You better be humble, because they're not going to listen to you.
It's interesting that words are such a powerful thing, because when you're talking about porn and these vices that we have and these things that we have to then try to dive into to change. And you said, what am I getting from it? And I look to shift that question for myself to, what are you missing?
That's the shift.
What are you trying to, what gap are you trying to close in diving into, whether it's, alcoholism, whether it's porn, whether it's, just this massive pride, of wanting to feel like, I'm the king, in this certain area, and not having that humility, because we are human. And as men, especially somebody that grew up going, man, I'm alpha. I like to win, and I really like to let people know when I win, even if I didn't win, I'd still tell them, like, I'm better than you are. You just got lucky today, but there's something missing in that. It's, so when we talked about the other night about, why do girls go for these guys that are jerks? It's like, well, because they're broken, just as you are being that guy, that broken identifies broken, and it's a perfect storm that comes together in that just feeling empty and alone, and like you're not relevant enough. And the one thing, and the only thing that I've found in my life is that takes away, that adds a piece that is otherwise not there, is turning to God. And the identity thing, we all seek it, right? This whole, what is my identity? I mean, that's been a common struggle throughout time, right? But now it's amplified in this, like, I can have multiple identities, and it's no longer seen as a mental illness. It just means I'm living my best life. I'm living my truth. If I say that I'm a furry because I really like dogs, I get to wear a tail sometimes if I want to, and it's normal. We're just enjoying ourselves. If I want to dress up as a woman and claim that I'm a woman, so start calling me Jesse, like, I can do that. Why? Because we have this tolerance now, because people are saying, like, no, look, you've got to accept it. Love is love. What would Christ do? Christ would just love them. It's like, okay, now you're using this. You're now a Starbucks Christian.
Yeah.
And that's not mine either. I heard another man say it. I really should start taking notes on who these people are so I can give them credit. But when you think about when you go to Starbucks and you order your coffee, right? Like they're gonna be like, oh, I'd like, I like some almond milk, hold, I don't know, no, not caffeinated, or you start picking and choosing the parts of it that you want to have into your cup that then they put your name on, right? Like, this is Justin, right? Here's his cup, right? He's picked and he's chosen this drink and it's specific for him. And that's what we do with Christianity. You go like, look, I don't want to have to talk about homosexuality being wrong because maybe I have a child that's gay. Maybe I have a brother that's gay. And maybe I have a best friend that is gay. So I really don't want to talk about that because it doesn't make me feel good. It makes me feel confused. It makes me feel gross. And I'm not saying that they're gross.
And it's the judgment, right? You said it before. It's a scary word for people, to be judged, right? So, but what is, and this goes back to my way, thy way. What is right judgment? And I think right judgment, I think you even spoke about it before. That's why Christ came back, to fulfill the law, which is the compassionate aspect of it, that we're all fallen, that we all need to get back up. We have to be a community of people that we understand that there is a right way to live. And it's going to be painful because we believed in lies. We were fooled. That's what we have to say to ourselves. And at least in my experience, it's people like you, or a lot of the people I have had on the podcast. I guess you'd say the second half, because when I first started, it was just, let's talk about anything other than the weather and football. It's become now more men who really will strip you down. They will remove pride from you. That's my issue with LGBTQ more than anything. It's pride. We're literally masking it as pride. You're proud of that? I'm not proud of the sex I've had in my life. I'm not proud of that. Even if it's rightly or, I'm not proud of that. It's part of who I am, right? But what am I proud of? And this is the hard part, right? This is because this is where it's the spirit. Christ says we're made strong in our weaknesses. His power is made perfect in our weaknesses. So when we boast, let's boast about our weaknesses. But that's the thing that I think the LGBTQ thing, and and not even LGBTQ, it's a human issue. It's the need for validation.
Yeah. And it is because I said it this morning, American society is lost. It's lost. We are a dumpster fire at this point, to put it best. And it's my viewpoint on it is this whole acceptance that we have to be a certain way. We can only speak a certain way. And if we don't like something, just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. Don't work through it. Don't try to understand it, and that's something that I feel like is missing when it comes to the talk about homosexuality and all these things is, are we trying to understand it? Are we just trying to put it into one of two camps of right and wrong? Well, look, sin is wrong. It's a word that doesn't resonate well with other people as far as you tell them you're wrong. We don't like that. None of us do. None of us. But I'm wrong in a lot of ways. I accept that. And I go, okay, well, if I don't see it, please help me, because my goal in my life to be a godly man is to be the best man that I can be in the walk that I put out, and the fact that I am trying to live in a way that is not popular, that is not easy, and is persecuted. Again, there's so much hypocrisy now. And as long as man breathes, there will always be that, right? Like there will never be such a thing as long as man is around. But you say, well, don't tell me that I'm wrong in the way that I choose to live my life. Okay, well then don't tell me I'm wrong for saying how I am living my life. What's the difference? It's just one is more accepted than the other. Why? Because the other one's easier. The other one is more palatable for a bigger mass of people. And God bless our children and what they're having to go through and what they see. We didn't have to deal with that when I was a kid. Yes, obviously homosexuality was around. Yes, I knew what drag queens were, but I felt like that was, they put it on a show. I didn't think that they went home and still walked around in women's clothing. And if they did, that's not something that was accepted, right? There was a space for it. But now you have to accept everything, except with the exception of, you do not accept anything that goes against that. Christianity, religion, right? Those are the areas of life that we don't allow, right? We don't want to hear from.
And sin means to miss the point. We're all missing the point. That's the whole thing. The idea is that we come together, that we're one confused society, and now we're sharing that with children. And I think that absolutely is the line. And I believe that that is something that I really believe that it is something that can bring us together, because I think even it doesn't matter what you identify as. I think, with the exception of some, because some people don't want the truth too, and I accept that too. There's some people who don't even want to question, hey, you know what, maybe I've lived wrong. And that's okay. That comes with it. This is a choice. It's a choice to follow Christ. It's not something, this is where I think Christians can get it they can get it better, is that we're called to share how we see the world and our experience with Christ, but we're not meant to force people. There's a lot of people, like, the last thing I think we need is preachy preachers like, Jesus, follow, that's not me, right? Maybe that's somebody else. That's just not me. I would say the kind of people I want in my life, people who correct me, people who really care about me, and they say, hey, you know what, like, they 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 meet me where I'm at. They say, they listen, but they also they burn that part of it. I put out a tweet recently. It's like, truth is a fire that burns, and compassion regulates the burning, right? Because some people are so lost, so gone. You got to be gentle, man. You do, because and again, some people don't want it. You have to know that some people are going to hate you, and they need love. They need love. But you got to dish out the truth, which I think is the first commandment. You have to love God. You have to love a truth that's bigger than us. And when and I think that's really the painful part, because you're going to invite a lot of people to attack. There's a lot of people that are they're going to misunderstand it. That's the thing too. It's so subversive. It's so subversive. It's twisting compassion. It's twisting tolerance to rationalization of wrong. So to go this path, people are going to call you the bigot. They're going to call you the racist. They're going to call you, homophobic. All these words, they have no power. They really have no power. Because, at least in my view, I'm going to continue to have these conversations with you and like-minded men. And I know in my heart, I'm at peace because I want people to be at peace. And I know for me, I've not been at peace because I've sinned. And it's not fun to look the man in the mirror and say, hey, I'm wrong. And I know that there's people who are a lot further down that path. I look in that window, and we spoke about this the other day, right? I think it was Daniel who brought it up. Shout out all these guys, Redmond, Justin. We've all had podcasts on here. You can check them out. These are, I believe, men also on the path as well, and share their wisdom in different ways. But he said, this is my favorite sin. I love that, because it's like, it takes away the power. Like, no, I shouldn't do this. It's like, no, like, tell me about why you love that so much, right? Because that's the part of us it's like, there's just something real about that. It's like, otherwise he shifts into holier than thou, and you're perfect, right? And too much of the other way, it's like, well, then you dwell in it, and you think it's okay. So there's the first part. It's like, hey, this is my favorite sin. And the second part is, well, this is why it's wrong. This is why I have to overcome it.
Yeah, the the hardest part in a shift is the accountability of knowing that you have been wrong, or that you have been weak, and there's work that comes with that you have to stay consistent to, and there's discipline in it, and that's why I do feel that so many people don't like to take the path of Christianity, because one, there's some hot topics that they don't want to have to answer that isn't socially acceptable if you're on the quote unquote wrong side of it. We have raised a society of very weak men. And, I see that every day when I'm on social media. This whole, like, I just can't get in, and I wish I'd been better about this as a younger man, but as I'm getting older and learning more about myself and being honest, being half in is just I detest it. I detest it when I do it myself, and I'm like, oh, I'm kind of straddling the fence, because I'm just strong enough to say I want to, but I'm weak enough where I don't.
Revelations 3:16, you put me on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to me, and I challenge myself with it regularly, and I fall short of it regularly. But when I see these people hiding behind their Bible in the way that it makes them feel comfortable, I can't stand it. I think you're sending more people to hell that way than anything else. It's almost better to say, look, I don't believe
It's pride.
it's
Look at
good.
me,
Yeah,
I'm a proud Christian.
I want it to be the me show and not the God show. I don't want to actually fulfill what he's asking me to do, because that's not as fun as me trying to get all these accolades, on Twitter and TikTok and the social medias, and have people, yay, like, great, good, that was so cool, you're so awesome, like all that stuff. It's laughable, but it's also, you got to have the heart of a servant to say, well, yeah, they're doing that because they're missing something. What are they missing? What are they afraid of? Well, we're not turning it completely over to God in that point, right? We're still trying to operate on our own schedule and on our own wants and our own beliefs, because again, we're human, and especially as men, we're made to believe that we have to have control to be strong. And when I look at, the podcast, you bring it up, like, I love where the podcasts are at now. I love where the group's at now, because it's not about chest pounding. I appreciate everybody that I've had on my podcast, and not saying that I wouldn't have them on again if they would come back, but I want a different kind of guy now. Like, and I, again, no knock against them, but I want a different kind of guy now. I want a different kind of guest now, that I would hope that would sit down with me to help me get better through a medium that ideally reaches as many people as possible. Because we are at this great place where people like Caleb Gordon, who, we talked about before the call, he's somebody that I've reached out to quite a bit, because he is a man in the arena, and he is unapologetically speaking the Bible, whether it's popular or not. He just got canceled by our hometown newspaper because of 2 articles that he wrote that hurt people's feelings because they didn't understand it. They called him misogynistic. They attacked him personally, because that's what we do now, right? Because it's our feelings over facts.
That's a good transition to this point, is that there's a line, I forgot, it's all the heart of it, but the line essentially is that as these things come, they come to pass, right? That you'll be hated when you follow Christ. And there's something about the underdog and the one who's attacked. I mean, Tate comes to mind, right? Regardless of whether it has nothing to do. There's something that when someone's getting attacked, criticize Trump or whoever's someone who is just, even if you're not, to take it not political, right? To bring it to more of, look at like Rocky, right? Like a Rocky movie. Like when you're the underdog, came from nothing. Like even the workout montages, right? He's working out, even I think it was Rocky 4. He's working out in the snow. I think it was Rocky 4, but whatever one it was it 4? Yeah, he's out in the snow. He's going against these opponents. There's something in our heart, it's a David and Goliath story, right? It is Christ. Christ is the perfect underdog, right? Humility. He's bringing this idea of like, deny yourself, right? This idea, it doesn't make sense because you're not the alpha dog, right? It's so counterintuitive. And it really, to your point before, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be absolutely vulnerable, because if you're just a little bit vulnerable, well, when push comes to shove, you get to see. And and to bring it up before, this is what I saw in 2020. You got to see real character. Who were the people, not even who were anti-vax or mask, right? Because I don't know enough, right? I'll say that, right? I'm not an expert. But what I will say is I got to see firsthand who were the people who questioned it. That's what I'm interested in. Not people who are like, oh, I'm anti-vax, because that's a tool that they can use too. That's why I say it's very subversive, this whole thing that we're watching play out. But who were the people who said, why? Why this? Why that? Who were the people who were willing to attack arguments, not to make the other person wrong or dismiss scientists or whatever, but who were the people who would question authority? Christ, to me, is the example of that. Christ is the example of questioning authority. Why do you believe what you believe? He would question people. And to me, and watching, you see it, in the show, but when he would come across people who are humble, I need help, help me. He helped those people. Because there's humility. You want to help people who look for it. But, and I think that whatever the next wave is, whatever it is, the next thing, it's coming, whatever, another virus, whatever it is, we're going to see again who are the people, because right now it's settled, right? But it's going to come again. And we're going to see again who were the people who grew closer to that spirit of the Father. They're not afraid of what's going to happen. They're not afraid of death. Not an arrogant, I'm not afraid of death, because there's plenty of people like that too. I learned a lot. Thanks. I'm really grateful for 2020. But who are the people who they're not afraid, but they're they're willing to seek the higher truth? And that's the same thing with, I think, the spiritual path, right? It's the question each other. Why do we think what we think? Get to the deeper root.
Yeah. 2020 to me was there's a huge shift that took place because whoever it is, the powers that be that wanted to control and isolate and literally taking a page, page by page playbook from the National Socialist Party, they got what they wanted, right? They were able to isolate, they were able to divide. And you looked at it, if you look back at it, I mean, you had people being encouraged to turn people in for not following mandates. And look, I know people
So
personally.
someone call the cops on that.
Yeah, I mean, I know people personally that passed away from COVID, and so it was this horrible thing. Now I'm somebody that I'm not vaccinated. I don't take the flu shot, and you know what I don't get most years? The flu. I also don't want a government that can tell me what I can and can't do with my body, right? And when I say things like that, this is where we get a little bit more political, because if I say I don't want a government that can tell me what I can and can't do with my body, well, what else does that apply to? Everything. There's no gray area on that, right? Now, from a biblical standpoint, certain things like abortion changes, right? Because I absolutely see it as wrong. Absolutely see it as wrong. But at the same time, I don't want a government that tells me what I have to do with my body or my family's. So that's a tough one. But I know where I stand, and I knew where I stood on it then. But the beautiful thing about 2020 is it opened up all this ugliness, and it's gotten really bad, right? I mean, just everything. It's a dumpster fire, right? We got the weakest, softest men. It just makes me sick when I see some of these things. But on the other side of that, there's been a response. You look at things like you brought up Chosen, well, Angel Studios, the stuff that they're putting out. Back in the day, the problem I think church and Christianity had was it was always so many steps behind regular entertainment, right? You didn't have a lot of great mainstream Christian bands and artists. The movies were terrible. Like even Hallmark would go, what is that? You know what I mean? Like the acting is horrific. And they were always campy and cheesy because they didn't know how to, I don't know what it was. And I'm not going to speak on that, but what you see now is you've got these people like the Jim Caviezel's and what Angel Studios is doing with the Chosen, and like quality frigging actors. And as far as I know, most of the people on that set are Christians, but at the same time, look, it's caught some flack lately because you can't put a production like that together and go, I've got everybody here that is a Christian, right? Some of these people are just doing a job. You know what I mean? But the shift is people are starting to take a stand that have much larger platforms than you and I. You know what I mean? You're seeing people more and more say, look, I'm out of the Hollywood thing because of this, because of the objectification of children and women and how satanic it has become and probably always has been. But there's that shift. And so it's like, well, look, if you've got these people at these top platforms, and they're not just preachers, they're not just Christian speaking heads. Like these are people that are quote unquote normal, like you and me, saying I'm out and I'm going to start practicing and showing and speaking on my faith. Well, to me, that is a big, fat, flashing sign to say to people like you and me, it's time to step up and join. It's time to step up and move with them, right? Let's take the momentum and let's get our country back. Let's get our children back, right? Sound of Freedom was a phenomenal movie, and there's no surprise that all these things are coming up from it because Disney turned it down. It was made 5 years ago. They didn't want to produce it. Like none of this is shocking. None of this is, it shouldn't be. I mean, unless you've been living under a damn rock or you're just ignorant as bliss kind of a personality, but these things are happening right now. And so the call is that, we need godly men. We need Christian men to say, look, I'm going to dive completely into my faith. I'm going to dive completely into this book, whether it's, whether you believe it's perfect or not. What we do have is perfect. And so why not follow it, regardless of what Catholics are hiding? Just a little jab at that, but no, I'm serious and I'm not. But either way,
and I'd invite people to just read about Christ, read Christ quotes to start, right? Because I think a lot of the arguments come from the Old Testament. And I think that when you start with Christ, I haven't found anything that Christ has written that it's just like this is controversial. The controversial stuff comes from the Old Testament, and I feel like that is and yeah, I think you wanted to touch on this a little bit as well. We spoke about
Yeah,
it.
I've actually got I've got a verse, because the Old Testament conversation has been one that's been, it's a big one, right? And there's some camps that are divided, of course, as far as Old Testament goes. But Matthew 5:17-18 says, and this is Christ. So do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Now, I think people get, I could see argument on that last line, until everything is accomplished. Well, once he died on the cross, everything was accomplished. No. My belief and understanding of that is until everything is accomplished, is until he returns again and we come home. Right? Until then, you and I are in charge of being fishers of men, right? We are vessels to plant that seed, as the disciples did, right? And the Old Testament is absolutely relevant. Those laws are relevant. Those stories are relevant. And again, I'm not going to pick and choose. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to know if the full Bible is there. I have people that tell me that it absolutely is. All 66 books are perfect, right? But what I know is what I do have is something I'm going to follow. I'm not afraid to be, I am afraid. I shouldn't say it that way. Actually, I am afraid. I am afraid to completely commit to that and what that means to the people around me. What kind of isolation that will cause, and what friendships will fall away from that. And what I have to remind myself of in prayer, because while we've been talking, I've said multiple prayers as we've been talking in this spot. I never close my eyes, but in my mind, as you're speaking, I'm listening, but I'm going, God, please let you speak through me in answering this question. Give me peace. Take my ego out of it. Take myself out of it. Because there are some fun ways I've wanted to respond to some of these questions. But that's Justin speaking, and I don't want to do that, right? Like, I want to nail these old parts of me to the cross, as we've talked about in the past, right? So it's completely devoting oneself to it, and understanding that, and God, and Christ says it, like, to follow me means you're going to be ridiculed and martyred and all these things.
Except and the shift.
Here am I, send me.
The shift to enjoying that. Like, there's something, because I've seen a couple scenes in shows, at least, where it's like you see kind of the savage part of Christ. Like, I like that, right? Where it's not like, and I say it because he's embodying it. It's like there's a time and a place. You don't just do it for pride, but like, you got to stir things up. He stirred things up, right? He caused a lot of controversy, right? So, and there's this kind of, as you say, from whoever said it, right, the Starbucks Christian idea. It's like, no, you're going to cause a lot of controversy. And I think, I had a little bit of hate, and I think I spoke on it, right? It's like, oh, what am I, a channel that, like, oh, I'm going to talk about porn? What am I, can't touch your dick? Like, it's like, get over it. It's like, and I remember when I first made the channel, I'm like, I really want to talk about this, because I knew this kind of stuff would come. I knew it was going to come, but and same thing with, like, I was afraid of being called a conspiracy theorist, and that shifted to, it's like, who isn't a conspiracy theorist? By the
done Joe Rogan.
Yeah. So, and I've had family members, I've had friends who have been like, why you worry about that? And it's just like, oh, that they don't want to see the bigger picture, and that's okay. And I don't say that arrogant, because I didn't want to see the bigger picture for so long, because it's scary. When you look at what's really going on and what's actually what's really going on and what we think is going on, the perceived view of it, it's massive. So to really take that step and say, well, it's like Wizard of Oz, right? It's like, who's the man behind the curtain? And when you realize the people behind the curtain, the real, like the people who have all the money, all the wealth, they're really deep down, they're so, that you want to talk about that black hole in their heart, it's so massive. They don't have any power. But, to really know that in our hearts, we have to, going back to the first thing that you spoke about, we have to face our mortality. We have to say, okay, you know what's more important than me, this body, and I know there's controversy on Gandhi. There's always controversy on everybody. It's why every time I say Tate or Gandhi or any name, I always say to people, take out the truth that they say, separate that. Don't follow the man, follow God. What is true? Because also people who are corrupt, they're going to use pieces of truth. But that being said, I always say that now, every time I say any name, you take Gandhi. What may Gandhi say? They may beat my body, and I might have it off a little bit, but they may imprison me, beat my body, torture me, that even kill me. Then they'll have my dead body, not my obedience. What makes a human being say that? What makes a human being next to Christ saying, I deserve this, Christ, don't forget about me? Versus most people would be the other man on the other side of Christ, right? They'd say, well, if you're really, get us out of this. But
Save
what
me.
makes, yeah, save me. So there's something kind of, there is something savage about that. It's like, no, I deserve this. It's kind of, and I've reflected on sometimes, like if you go too far down the path, you can become it's too much pain. It's too much pride and pain, right? It's like a masochist. It's too much of that. But there's a certain level. I think there's a shift. And I think the shift comes from when you see, and we spoke about this the other night. I appreciate you bringing it up, is forgiveness, right? Because it's something that we think we don't have it, but when we really peel the layers back, we don't forget. How quickly does somebody cut a great example I always bring up, somebody cuts you off in traffic. How quickly do you say, you know what, I forgive him? You have no idea what's going on. That's a great indicator. But to the shift from for when you see people hating you and mocking you as you start to go the right way, like who are you to go the right way, right? You're a sinner. It's like, yeah, but if I don't, then I'm allowing everybody, I'm encouraging other people not to overcome their sin. Then I'll become more of the problem. When you start to see people hate you, and because it's a shift to, you're shifting from personality to character, authenticity, moral character, seeking God, becoming a godly man, aiming towards Christ. When that shift to hatred, you see it as projection. That's where the forgiveness comes in, because you understand that nobody led them, and they're actually, there's parts of them that are challenged. Are you real? Are you really real? Or are you just putting up a front? And as you take that, it's a form of warfare. As you take that pain from other people, that actually becomes your fuel. Now, it's not your main source of fuel. I think the main source of fuel is God. It's Christ. It's reflecting on what is the right way and going that for its own sake. But hey, we're men too. When we like a challenge, right? So when people are saying you can't do it, that's a form of fuel too, right? So it's not its main source, but it is a source. So that flip and saying, bring it on, essentially, because where I'm going, it has more power as it fuels it. Does that make sense? Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, there is and I know this word is kind of got a negative connotation at this point, but there is a sense of pride for me when I say, no, look, I'm willing to answer that call. I want to go down that path, even though I know it's going to be challenging beyond anything that I could probably right now comprehend, because I don't know what's down the line, but I know that I don't want to look at what's down the line. I want to be right here, right now, as far as what has God given me today.
Like,
what am I supposed to do today?
Yeah. Yeah. What am I? Yeah, correct. But
Right?
like, what do you think? Do you think Christ won on the cross?
Do I think he won? I mean, yeah. Yeah. I
So,
think
yeah.
the job that he did was to make sure that our salvation is covered. And he was enough man to go, I don't want to do this. This is terrifying. This hurts, right? But he did it anyway. He did it anyway. And I guess from my understanding, like, he didn't necessarily have to, right? Like, he was still man. He could have ran. He could have wailed. He could have lashed out. He still had that, I would imagine, that part of him, but he didn't. He was perfect. And I wish I could find it off the top of my head, but how many times in the Bible does it mention that he has to turn to prayer?
Yep.
It encourages that, right? Because, and I was looking at, several things and trying to dive into, when we talk about forgiveness, but something that hits to this, right? When we talk about fear of going down the path, well, what is fear? It's something that is happening in the present, but is in regard to something that's in the future. A lot of the times, it's a preconceived thing, most of the time. And when I look at Romans 8, we talked about this the other night, 8:1, it says, there is therefore no condemnation for those who are in Jesus Christ. right? And that's a powerful verse, because there's multiple layers, in my opinion, to that as far as the condemnation goes. It's like, well, in the world I'm going to be condemned, in the world I'm going to be, ridiculed and cast out, and potentially actually physically harmed. And if you're watching what's happening in the world today, there are Christians being arrested left and right. And I'm not talking about in Syria, I'm not talking about in these other countries, I'm talking about in the good old US. Men, women, teenagers, they are being arrested for speaking the gospels, or for speaking Christ. And these things are coming. It's happening, whether we like it or not, whether we want to believe in it. Like, no, this would never happen here. There's a lot that's happened in the last 3 years that we thought would never happen here. And, the other side of that is when we start to look at fear of wanting to go down this path, and whether I'm proud of it, I say I accept it. Well, yeah, I am, but I'm still scared, because it does change so many things. But then in 1 Peter 5:7, it says, cast all your anxieties on him. Why? Because he cares. He cares for you, right? God loves you. And just care, he loves, right? And so anxiety, fear, doubt, he calls us, 1 Peter, give it to him. So when I look at this path, and I'm afraid that my friends are gonna, or my people that are closest to me, my family, they're gonna look at me differently. Good, look at me differently at this point.
What does that mean? Put it on him, because I look at the younger version. I understand. I confident I understand what you mean by that. The younger version of me, I'd say, put it on Christ. What the hell is he talking about? So
yeah,
what does that mean for people who are kind of like not as religious?
So it's such a question, man, because I was someone that back in the day, when I had a problem, I had friends that would say, pray about it. And I'd be like, oh, don't say that to me. Like, that does me no good, man. Why? Because I can't hear him like I can hear you. And I want to hear someone. I need this in this moment to get through, or to feel better about whatever it is I was facing. And then they'd be, pray about it, Justin. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to punch you.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I'm going to punch you in the mouth, because I can't get that direct response that I want.
And I just had 10 years of addiction. You're telling me to put it on Jesus? That's the last thing I want to hear, right? But
pray about it.
Yeah.
Pray about it. But that's what it is. And the thing that we have to learn to accept, younger me, is, look, these problems that you're facing aren't going to change overnight. You're looking for a quick fix, right? You're wanting to be able to talk to someone, you're wanting to hear from somebody to validate, to affirm, and then ideally in that you get direction, right? But it's really that validation and that affirmation that you're looking for, right? And so when it says to put it on God, I mean, it is going, okay, there's vulnerability in that. God, I can't handle this, or I'm confused, or I'm scared, and I don't know what to do. And so you pray about it, right? And that's why they tell you to pray about it. The thing that I would take it further is, and I don't want to take it too deep, especially if there's somebody that's like, okay, I'm just trying to get to the prayer part. I'm just trying to get to the understanding of how to talk to somebody that I can't see and I can't hear, and I'm hurting and I don't know where to go. And I need that affirmation and validation that you're talking about. I need that comfort. I go, well, I can promise you, brother, that for me, when I pray just like I'm talking to you. God, I don't know what the hell's going on, man. Like, how many times I've prayed and cussed at God? Like that matters. But, other Christians be like, oh, you can't say the F word to Christ. Like, he doesn't care. That word wasn't being used then. Like, shut up. Like, shut up. Pray honestly, pray openly, like you're speaking to me, and understand that, and know, and this has taken me 41 years, but when you pray something, you better be damn ready for that prayer, right? Because so many of us, like you said, the thief on the right, yeah, he was on the right, So
I'm still learning. But yeah,
he wants the fix, right? He wants it to be taken care of right then and there. He wants his suffering to stop, and for Christ to perform a miracle and get him out of that suffering. Guy on the left said, no, I just believe. And so, I hope that you will remember me, right? There's a longevity in that. And that's why he went to heaven and the other guy probably didn't. I don't know. But, when you pray, God says, okay, we'll be ready to do the work. And it's going to be on my timeline. Like, your Google calendar is never going to match up. I say this so often, like, our calendar will never match up to Christ, right? They'll never match up to God's. Why? Because that's part of the qualifying. It's part of the qualifications. He needs you going through that for some reason. If he hasn't killed you, then that means whatever you're suffering from, whatever you're dealing with, means he believes your shoulders are big enough to carry it, and he needs you. He has assigned you for that reason. And so when I look at that, like put it to God, okay, there's almost a pride that then shifts in that to say, I'm still needed, right? I'm not dead. He's had multiple opportunities to kill me, and I'm still here. You could kill me right now if you wanted to. I say that. That sounds arrogant. Like I've had so many times where it's like, how did I walk out of that? But I'm still here, which means he's not done. I have not fulfilled whatever that assignment is that he's called for me. And because one, I haven't seen it, right? I haven't forgiven myself. We talked about this the other night, and you said it beautifully that when we forgive ourselves, it allows us the opportunity to do what? It allows us the opportunity to see and hear. Until we do that, you can't see and hear what God has for you. You don't know what those plans are. And when it says put it at his feet, give him your anxieties, it's so that you can now start to get into the game. Because he's qualifying you, because you never know when down the road another Justin is going to need your help, right? And that's what it is for me. And as a younger man, I wish I could have understood that early, like and turning it in that mindset of this isn't suffering, this is qualifying. That's it.
Yeah, I reflect on that because it's the shift from forgiveness to understanding. The reason why I said that, the understanding aspect, is because then it's no longer, which comes from humility. It comes from, I agree, just reflecting, what do I have to do here? Because there's something about my way isn't working, and you just reflect on it. I think just talking and just saying, where am I off? What is going to help? Right. Because then you start to look for, and even just, just daily interactions with different people, just seeing like, okay, you know what, this is a great quote going around, or a reel where it's like, I asked for strength and God gave me difficulty. Right. I'm sure you've seen that. Right. So that is really in the difficulty, and in the, and that's the thing too. We talk about suffering and the willingness to suffer. There's something transformative about that. When you go through this, it's like the gym is a great tool for that. We talk about that. We want to be the chest bumping guys, but we also understand that discipline and the gym, there's something about that's earned. It's something that we don't want to work out. We don't want to run. We do it, and we do it because that's what makes us strong, makes the body strong, and it's earned. But the understanding is what really shifts it, because that's what separates people who, the people who say, I love you, I'll pray for you. And it's almost arrogant, right?
It's complete arrogance.
Versus the people who in their hearts, they say, I'm going to pray for this person. But they tell you after, maybe after they'll tell you. Or it's like when Christ says the fast, don't tell anybody about it. Fast. And then still be cheerful. It's not easy to do that. We got our own problems. We got our own issues. Fast and then not complain and be cheerful about it. Try it out, and I think that's where the understanding comes that everybody's going through the same battle. So when they're attacking you, and that's really where the forgiveness goes, because when you realize everybody's you, that they're most of it's projection, with the exception of some, I'd say some evil, some are really, but even those who are evil, they're just deeper lost. So, and that's something, I think that's something out of the devil or Satan, or, the part of us that is the dark part of us. It's looking for a reason to believe. Like, what does this person have? I'm going to take away from it. You know what I mean? That part of us that it's like, it's the jealous part. Why are they happy? And I think that, again, as time goes on, it's like, it's almost a necessary part, because it's almost like you need that. You need the mockers, you need the criticizers, because most people are full of shit. And that's something that a good comedian does, or a good mocker does, right? They're funny for a reason. They're funny because like they call out like they call out the Flanders of Simpson, right? Oh, like that guy, right? Like, so that's not what we're called to be. We're called to really be the path for those mockers, and that's painful because we have to have faith. It's easy to mock. It's easy to sit back and say, I don't believe this. That's easy. It's hard to, blessed are he who does not see but believes.
Right.
We don't see it. We have to believe this. So it's not something easy. We have to put our trust in that.
I think there's two great ways to be ridiculed and to be mocked. One of those is to be authentic. The other one is to pretend to be authentic, but only one is going to have longevity. And that's where, the people that come to mind when you said the whole, and of course I know where you're going with that, but like, oh, I love you, bro. Oh, I love you, and they're doing that as a power move. They don't mean it. It's not sincere. And it is a way to kind of humiliate you in that process.
It's like saying, I'm going to be the bigger person here.
Right.
Bigger person wouldn't say that.
I'm pretending to be the bigger person because I have my own insecurities. And those are the kinds of things that I can't stand because it's not authentic. And people that aren't, they get found out. They and that's something that obviously you and I both are terrified of in this, because we go, well, no, we're not perfect, but we're talking about these things where people can take it the wrong way. And now it sounds like we're putting ourselves on a pedestal, and it couldn't be further from the truth, because we're not. But that is absolutely the possibility. People want to tear it down. Why do they want to tear it down? Because they know themselves. Like you said, projection. Well, that's a great description for it, right? They know themselves. They're not willing to do the work for whatever reason. They're not willing to be that open for whatever reason. And I'm not saying that against them. I hope that they find it. I hope that the masses find the ability to say, I'm not perfect and I don't want to be perfect. I don't want to be perfect, man. Like, I don't. Why? Because one, I'm human and it's not possible. But then two, because how much do you learn from loss? How much can you learn from mistakes? I love the opportunity, and I don't do it enough. Like, I don't do it. I say I love it, and now I'm contradicting myself. I'm hypocritical, because do I really love it? I enjoy when I find out that I'm wrong. I enjoy when I go, oh, I got to work on something here again. But do I love it? That's probably not the right way.
Yeah, and I think that requires discernment, because in those moments, it's like, am I talking with someone who is constructively criticizing me, or are they criticizing me? Because the truth is, that discernment, I think, comes from that wisdom. Because if someone's trying to criticize you and appearing that way, you should be able to check them. And if they're also constructively criticizing them, you should be able to be humble and to wield both of those. To be able to willingness to be corrected and the willingness to correct other people is wisdom.
Right. And I'm going to butcher this because as I'm starting to say it, I can't remember exactly how I worded it, but I've got a great brother in Christ named Lee Baker doing amazing things down in Texas, and gave me my start when with coaching realistically. Just an amazing family man. And he would always tell the players, how did he word it? But basically, stay humble in victory and have integrity in loss, something to that effect. I've got to ask him, because what he was teaching these kids is like, yeah, you're going to have your day where you win, but let's not put ourselves above anyone else, right? Because on any given day, we could be the loser, right? And you need to remember how that feels, because our job is to help build people up, right? And encourage them to find their best selves, and to me, it's no different with our Christian walk. Is like, yes, we're supposed to be vessels that help plant the seed, because I don't save anyone. You don't save anyone. Caleb Gordon, Billy Graham, he didn't save a single soul, but they planted seeds. We plant seeds, and then God does the work, right? God gets them to where they need to be. And, staying humble in that and having the humility. And I wish I would have been able to be on that call when you spoke about it, but, is the biggest pathway to being one, authentic, learning, growing, and people want to ride with that. You know what I mean? Like, everybody loves the professional, right? Like, everybody is in awe of somebody like Michael Jordan, but what people are really, really attracted to is, you said the underdog, but somebody that can say, look, I struggled here and you're no different. It's just that I decided to do something about it. I decided to work at it. I decided to roll with the fear instead of run from the fear. And that's really the defining line in so many of us. That's why I started the podcast. It's, I think, again, with live talks, it's part of that process too, of like, why do some people just roll over, but then others answer the call, others step up, they're not afraid, or they're afraid, but that fear doesn't paralyze them, right? And it's no different in our faith, except for that instead of doing it by ourselves, God calls us to leave it at his feet when we struggle. If he's with me, who can be against me? Right? I mean, that's power, dude. Like the guy that created everything is saying, I'm with you. So who can be against you? Well, fucking nobody, bro. Like no one, not you, not my family, not, not, and I say my family, my family is not against me. I want to make that very, very clear. They're very proud, and they themselves are Christians. And doing their best to follow their faith as well. My point in saying family is that not everybody else has the support that I've had. And I want to make that clear, like that my family is not that way, but others don't have that. And so I want it to be relatable. Like, even if your family is against you, even if your brothers are against you, like that's okay, right? You can still work through it, and you can still overcome these obstacles and relate in that way. But again, it's that mindset of like, I don't want to run from fear. I want to run with fear. Right. And in that process, learn better and better to leave it with God. Right. And trust that, because there's an element to like with trust. Again, we come back to vulnerability. To trust something, which it means you're believing in something that you can't see. Right. Trust is kind of like faith, right? Like, you trust that this is going to be the outcome, or you trust that this person is going to treat you a certain way, but you can't see it. You don't know that yet, right? It's an element of faith, right? To do either one of those things, you have to be vulnerable, right? You have to be vulnerable. And that's why I go back to vulnerability is such a powerful thing, man. Like, it's almost the root to so much strength. And guys in the manosphere, they get it fucking wrong all the time, man. And they preach it's like, I'm not weak. I literally sat with a guy one time. He said, I'm never scared. I never get scared. You are full of shit, dude. Like, and if you're not feeling the fear, it's because you are so upside down in some other trauma that you have that you can't see it. And you're so unwilling to admit it. I mean, that would make Napoleon's eyebrows raise. You know what I mean? Like, that's such a small man complex, to say I'm never afraid.
Dude, yeah, and like I think there are a few that are, but they wouldn't say it. The real men who have gotten close to that place or have passed it. I think there are people who have perfect peace in this world. I do. I think there are people who God works in mysterious ways, and but they wouldn't claim ownership to it.
Christ was afraid. Garden of Gethsemane. That whole night he was terrified.
He had his moments, yeah, and I'm not saying that, yeah.
So there's no such thing as a life without fear.
Yeah, not a life without fear, but I would say that there are moments that maybe people get to that clarity. They're further along the path.
Yeah, I think it's
how they interpret.
Yeah, it's what you do.
Yeah. So there's yeah. So, but you had said something there. It's like the truth, vulnerability. Jordan Peterson put something out. It's like it's one of the greatest adventures you can have is to tell the truth. That sounds so simple, but how many people are actually doing it? Like, when you really start telling the truth, you face those vulnerable parts, and it's the greatest adventure.
Yeah.
But I wanted to end. We spoke on something because we've been going now. Damn, 2 hours here easily. Lou. We spoke about the nice guy, right? And I wanted to talk about this because it's been on my heart. This idea of submission. A lot of women don't like that word, submission. And I can understand why, especially with a lot of the chest pumping, right? There's a lot of that. There's a lot of men who take advantage of that. And I've been that guy. So, but at the same time, I do think that order is Christ over man, man over woman, and woman over children. That there's a hierarchy that is the right way. It took me a long time to say this. I bought into the lie eyes of the enemy, where we're told we're equal. We are, I think, in value, but it's different in expression. Our roles are different. Who's more important in the military, right? The leader or the people who follow him? Well, they're both necessary, but you can't have everybody leading. And it's going to be a mess. Right? There may be moments in the chain of command where you speak up, and I would say that's really where should someone who's in war follow a corrupt leader if they know that they're corrupt? I don't think so. I think they have a responsibility to disobey corrupt authority, but they better be. Again, that takes courage to do. There's different wars. There's different, but I think that's really where the basic training comes in. It's stripping you of your pride, right? You're going to obey, or you're going to learn to obey the chain of command. And then there's also times that you disobey based on, because the call is to follow the chain of command. But in the same way, I think that's how a relationship is. The father, the man, the head of the household needs to follow Christ. To the extent that he follows Christ, the woman should follow him without question. In the same way that the man gets to the place following Christ without question. That's where you have the perfect order of things. To the extent that the man doesn't follow Christ, woman shouldn't follow him because he's a hypocrite. So the extent is that we are to follow Christ, burn our own hypocrisy, and lead through him. So, and that's the chain of command. But a lot of it, the red pill and all that stuff is, I'm the man, I'm going to lead. Well, what's your code of conduct? And leading through humility. This is not an easy path to go. So, what are your thoughts on that? We speak about, and I wrote this down here: the nice guy, the asshole. The thing that they have in common, because I was the nice guy, and then I went through the phase of an asshole. Let me tell you, I got a lot more attention when I was an asshole. I'm sure you can relate, right? And the reason, at least for me, where I've gotten, in my view right now, the reason I got more attention, and I didn't realize at the time, I thought it was just about being an asshole, was that I knew what I wanted. I wasn't afraid of somebody saying no to me. I didn't see it at the time. But this path to the godly man is that the only validation that I care about is doing the right thing. That's the validation that I get. So the validation doesn't come from getting, because when I was the asshole, I still wanted the validation. I just wouldn't say it. I'd pretend. I don't care about anybody. I was really closing my heart. The godly man opens his heart, right? But the validation part is for going the right way. So, but the nice guy wants validation. He's pretending to be, he's being the nice guy so girls like him. The asshole is being the asshole so girls like him. The godly man it's the shift from, I don't need validation from you. I want validation. It's being honest with that. You want validation from people, but not at the cost of what is right. So, and I think this is the hierarchy, right? And it's going to take time for me to articulate this better, because I'm still falling. I'm still, I've made the mistakes and I'm going the right path. But what is your view on that? Is that the order? Is that the correct order in your view? Why is it wrong for a woman to lead? Do you believe it's okay? Is there certain situations? And, because I think this is at least where I want to take Life Talks is, I've spoken about porn and my struggle with that and lust. There's something really powerful about sex. And I'd be lying to myself if I said I didn't want to have sex, right? And I'm just going to suppress that part. But I do think there's rightly ordered. And I think rightly ordered sex is 10 times better than what it, I know it. I haven't lived it, but I've gotten pieces of it and I see it. So, what are your thoughts on that the order?
So, I mean, this is a topic that we could have spent the entire podcast on.
We will. There's been plenty more.
I mean, it's a big one because first and foremost, men and women are made different for a reason. There are things that we can do that we do better, easier than what women do, and there are things that women do that we cannot do. And there's a comedian that always comes to mind whenever this question comes up or this topic comes up. And he says, my favorite thing about a woman is she's not a dude. So this equal stuff, like it's silly because most women, no matter how strong or independent they are, they want a man that can lead. They want a man that can step up for, and what does leadership mean? Right. Again, we have a lot of misconceptions, and I've listened to people say, I never want to be called a leader. So, well, because you're focusing on title, right? you're focusing on the almost tangible aspects of a title, but realistically, leadership is action. And when it comes to man and woman and that relationship, there's a reason God chose us to be the leaders, because I go back to what our shoulders can carry, what we're meant to go through, the suffering that we're meant to go through. And when we're leading our home, we are trying to shield our wife and our children from that suffering. That's part of that leadership aspect. It's an actionable item. And a lot of people, when they hear this of like the man's supposed to lead the home and the man comes first, they think Mad Men. They think, the way Andrew Tate comes across sometimes of like, you will get into the kitchen and you will make meat. No. So the man is lost without the woman, right?
And then, but the counter to that is where does that void come from? It comes from the happy wife, happy life, where let's say there's the man out there who's working hard, he's doing all that. And then you have a woman who's like resentful of him and nagging him, right? So that's where that void comes from, right? Because there's many men out there who are married who their wife nags them, they're doing the right thing, but they're lacking that other piece that's in there. You know what I mean? So,
and that becomes an issue with the man first when that starts to happen, because he's not doing something. You know what I'm saying? But it is equally as responsible to the wife as well to say, I'm not going to nag, because then what happens, psychologically, is that the woman starts to treat him like he's a child, and then to the man, she kind of becomes this mother role, and neither one is going to garner respect, right? It's dividing a line that is going to then take away from the intimacy of that relationship. But as a man, you're supposed to lead. And when we talk about, like you said, the nice guy, and when you are you're taking advantage of kind of being the dick in the in the relationships, or out there womanizing, is that those women are broken, and they've not seen what they've probably not seen what a real man is and what that looks like when he leads. So when you're the guy that doesn't take no for an answer, that is
apathy, pride, courage.
Yeah, they see that as leadership, right? Because maybe that's not been shown to them in times past, and so they see that as leadership. Or it could be as simple as we all want what we can't have, right? Or what was perceived as what we can't have. But that's not spiritual leadership. That's not being the head of any relationship or a home. The nice guy. The problem with the nice guy mentality is that is exactly what we're seeing today with men, is this passive, I'll let you lead, sweetie, because I don't want you to think I'm stepping on your womanhood by saying that I want to be the leader of the home. They roll over. They don't stand for anything. And when you don't stand for anything, you will fall for everything. And so, and women don't respect that. Women don't respect that. A lot of times the biggest grief that you will take as a man is from women, right? Because they have expectations, but we live in this twisted world where we've got this madman mentality of, men are being oppressive if they say, I'm going to be the leader of the home. But then you've got a majority of women that say, no, the man is the lead of the home, right? Because our roles in nurturing and caring and loving and protecting and providing, they are there for a reason. And where we lose our minds is like you said, that if everybody's a leader, what are they leading? And if everybody's trying to do the same job or all the jobs, something's going to suffer. As a single parent, I can tell you that my kids suffered in not having their mother in the same home as me, and getting both that nurturing aspect that they need and the side of me that is the spirit that should have been the spiritual leader. My marriage failed because I was not a spiritual leader. My marriage failed because I was very much of the world, right? And so, again, this leadership thing and submission is, look, to follow, you do have to submit. When you listen to your boss, you are submitting to what they are telling you to do, and that's in a business sense. But when I look at a relationship, there are times when a man has to say, I'm going to do this. And the woman supports it. There are also times when the woman says, I'm going to do this. and the man supports it. Doesn't mean that she all of a sudden has no life now, unless, you know, the man says it's okay. That's not what that means. The best relationships, the best teams, each person knows their part and they do their part extremely well. And at times when that person is falling short, they pick up the slack. It goes both ways and there's support, right? But sometimes you do have to submit and say, okay, fine. You could call it compromise if you would like, right? But we've got this jaded because everybody's so soft and these women are doing something that is actually not natural to them and going, I don't need a man and I'm going to step up and I'm going to do this. They are the most miserable people because they're sitting there saying, I'm so strong and independent, yet they're smashing themselves with Botox and collagen and fake tits. And they're doing all these things to what? Try to attract the same thing they say they don't want.
And oftentimes they're from weak men, right? Appearing to be strong, who they've been hurt from, and this is a reaction to it. Deep wounds.
A great preacher just yesterday, I can't think of his name, but he said, I'm probably going to get canceled for this, but as a woman, do not tell me how to be a father. I will scream, I will lose my mind if you tell me how to be a father. You're not a man, right? It'd be like me coming to you and telling you how to deal with childbirth. I don't know what it's like to birth a child. So don't sit here and think that you have some kind of expertise on my part, because I'm not going to come back at you on something that I'm not in the right to say anything about, right? But women do this constantly, right? They think they can constantly. Why? Because they're nurturers. But when you look at what happens to fatherless homes, especially with the boys, the percentages are out there. This is why the 57 has the name, the 57, because of this topic right here, men not being willing to stand up for their homes, to lead their homes, to be there for the children that didn't ask for them, that didn't ask to be there. They made decision to bring the children there, and then we walk away. You know, and the same thing with these girls. They're in fatherless homes, or fathers that are there that aren't present, that aren't leading the home, so they're weak men. That's why they fall for guys like you and me whenever we're in that time frame, right? Because if you pulled that shit with a godly woman now, she's laughing at you, and as she should, because it is comical, it is laughable, in how sad it is. But on the forgiveness side and the nurturing side and the understanding side and being a godly man, you go, look, you're missing something, bro. You're hurting and you don't even know it. You're dying and you don't even know it. Your soul is starving and you don't even know it. And this leadership in the home, the nice guy thing, look, we talked about this the other night, right? Like the manosphere really loved the saying, I'm not going to be a nice guy, I'm going to be a good guy, right? And that sounds so cool, because what is a good guy? Well, he's going to stand up and protect, right? He's going to lead, you know, and he's going to do it out of the kindness of his heart because he cares for his family and he wants to protect and lead and guide and have his family prosper. And that sounds great. From the world, it sounds great. But ultimately, none of those things matter. And maybe it's semantics, but really what we should be seeking is to be godly men. And then everything else will
What's
follow.
the difference?
Well, when you're a godly man, you're following, again, which I have my Bible right here, but you're looking at this book, this guide to your life and how you're supposed to operate. And when you commit to that, it is going to show you in these circumstances, you're not always going to get it right, but it's going to show you how to lead your family. It's going to show you how to treat your wife. Because there's a great expectation on the man. This is what women forget when they see this submissive part. As a man, you are called to treat your bride as church. As the church and with the utmost respect and care and intensity, right? Like we're called to do that. But women forget that aspect of it because of the whole submissive thing and roles that they're not supposed to take on and yada, yada, yada. But when you're a godly man, you're not looking at whether you're nice. You're not looking at whether you're good, because good is not going to get you into heaven. There's a lot of good dudes out there that don't believe in Christ, and they will have eternal separation from God. There are a lot of Christians out there that are good people, and they're going to have eternal separation from God, because it is that commitment to what God's way is, what God wants for me, and following it and living it, right? And so any of these other circumstances that we're going to face in our life, is if you are a godly man, you are laying that at his feet and he will help you operate through it and what is right and what is wrong in those moments. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. I posted a clip from Kobe Bryant. Have you ever seen that Kobe Bryant clip where he's like, because you can know it all you want, when you can't do it on your own, can't carry it, and you put it on him. Like I forgot the exact. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I might have.
It's so good. Where he's because the guy's asking, well, people say it's all God, but like you just knew in his eyes, you knew that. It's like
Yeah.
you think you can do it on your own, you realize you can't. You put it on him, and he does it for you. Then you know. That's what he says. Then
Yeah.
you know, because we've all been there.
Yeah. And he was somebody that, man, I look back now and go, I hated Kobe Bryant for the longest time, dude. I really did. I really did hate it. I just really disliked him. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want to hear him talk. I went and saw him play a couple times, thankfully. And I had a lot of respect after I went and saw him play, because one of the games I was at, I was like 4 rows off the court. And the things that people were saying to this man was vile. You know, like it was vile. Some of the things they were saying. And not once did he look. He didn't bat an eye. He didn't go get the referee and ask to get them kicked out. Like he just went. He just went. The dude was incredible on so many fronts, not just basketball.
But yeah, so check out that clip if you haven't, and check it out. So, is there anything else that you wanted to dive into as far as
no
scripture or?
No, I think the one way that I would wrap this up on my side of things, and then you close it out. But there's something magical when men come together. What God can do. I don't know what the exact verse is and how it goes, but I know it says that when 2 or more come, God is there, right? When 2 or more come to fellowship, God is there, and that's happened this morning. I pray that what we've said and what we've spoke is God gifted, and that we've not said anything that would lead anybody astray or further away from a potential walk with Christ and salvation. But, with the group that we've talked about, the 57, it is one that has come together over the last 2 years and is now one that is being driven by God and is a room of godly men trying to understand this world that we live in and how to better practice our faith and grow in it. And that was not on accident. We didn't know it. We didn't know where it was going, but God definitely had his hand in it. And I would say if anybody's stuck with this long now, is allow yourself the opportunity to open up to God. If you're struggling right now, if you're going through it right now, I would just ask that you would pray, just like you don't have to close your eyes. You don't have to get on your knees. You don't have to have a necklace on. You don't have to do any of that. Just where you're at right now, say, God, I can't, I don't understand. I'm hurting all the time and I don't know what to do. Don't know what to do. Can you please provide me something, anything? He's not going to fix it, but it can start that healing process. It can start that growth process. And that's something that I myself have gone through many times, Michael as well, and any of the guys that joined the call on Thursday nights. And that, again, is just God continues to work. It's never going to be easy. It's never going to be ideal, and it's never going to be on your timeline or your calendar. You'll be surprised how quickly it comes sometimes, and you'll be surprised how long it takes, and frustratingly so. But as long as you continue to have that faith and understand, even with as poorly as I have delivered it at times, to put those fears and those anxieties and those hurt on him, he asks you to do it because he loves you. And so I hope that, again, anybody that listens to this, that you would find that is the point of this podcast, not to get caught up on semantics, not to get caught up in the politics, but ultimately at the core of it, to find the salvation that Christ has offered for all of us through his blood on the cross. So that's how I would wrap up my side of this, man. And I appreciate you, brother. I love you, man. Like the way God has worked in your life, the things that I know that you're working to do and continue to do. I'm beyond blessed and thankful that I get to call you, friend and a brother in Christ, and that we get to do this together. So I appreciate you having me today.
Likewise, brother. And I wanted to wrap up just by reading this quote. We've all heard it. I can't quote it. I'm still working on getting the exact titles of Corinthians and Ephesians, and it's still. I'm not a good book guy. I'm not good with that. That's why I'm watching the show now. But I wanted to, because I really love this quote, and I really love what you said in the sense that it's like love is love. Like, what does that even fucking mean? Right? Like, so this quote, we've all heard it, but I really just wanted to take just a couple minutes to close in on this. And it's Corinthians 13, 4-8. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, it rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. So, there's just a lot in there.
It's Sermon on the Mount, right? That's from Sermon on the Mount.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
It's right there. It's pride. There's no pride in it. And it does not delight in evil. It rejoices with the truth. And that's thy truth. So again, I also appreciate you coming on here, Justin. I think we are called to grow in love, and what that really means is a rare quality. It's not this feeling. It's something that we understand deep within.
Yeah, man.